I presented something for you. Here it is. I observed as Peter handed a cake box to my mother. Peter's forced smile left me feeling somewhat uneasy. Quietly, I accepted the cake box from him. After discreetly opening the box and confirming its contents, I discarded it in the trash. Hey, what do you think you're doing, Peter? My mother and Peter simultaneously directed their anger toward me, expressing their discontent with the scene that unfolded before them. Amazed, I questioned my mother. Did you see what was inside the cake? My mother began to tremble at the unexpected question, seemingly taken aback. I glared at Peter, seeking confirmation of my suspicions. Peter appeared frustrated and upset, confirming my thoughts. I clenched my fist, ready to confront Peter for his actions. My name is Samantha Bill, and I am 33 years old and working as a caregiver. My work keeps me busy every day, and by the time I return home at night, having left early in the morning, I am thoroughly exhausted. Despite anticipating the physical demands of my job, it has been challenging to find quality time with my husband Peter, whom I married a year ago. Peter works as a long-haul truck driver, with irregular hours, adding to the difficulties in our relationship. We recognize the need to address our marital issues, but both of us being immersed in our jobs has made communication challenging. Our initial meeting was through a mutual friend, and despite my shyness towards love, I started feeling pressured to seek a relationship after turning 27. After declining social invitations for a long time, I reached out to a friend who introduced me to Peter at a singles party. Peter, 3 years older than me, exuded calmness and composure, displaying the maturity that came with his age. I appreciated the stability he offered over fiery romance. Our interests aligned and we quickly started dating, eventually tying the knot a year ago. Initially, we lived with my mother, and despite my concerns, Peter was surprisingly okay with it. Unexpectedly, after our marriage, developments unfolded that I could not have predicted. A significant incident occurred at my workplace, resulting in several employees quitting. The reasons varied, from marriage to career changes. Those left behind, including myself, had to take on double the workload. I started coming home later than ever, causing our lives to become more out of sync. So, when I left work on time for the first time in a while and sat down at the dinner table with Peter and my mother, I sensed a palpable tension in the house. Hey, did you take care of that thing we discussed the other day? Peter questioned. Perplexed, I replied, What thing? You forgot? I told you to open an account at Gold Bank. Right, I forgot. My apologies, Peter admitted. My mother looked astonished, sighing heavily. There appeared to be some unspoken exchange between them that eluded my awareness. Peter had forgotten something my mother had asked him to do. What do you mean, Gold Bank? Well, you know, Samantha, you have an account with Gold Bank, right? We never know what the future holds, and I think it would be wise for Peter to have one too. But he just won't listen. I'm sorry, I truly just forgot. Oh? Well, if that's the case, it's fine. Indeed, I have an account with Gold Bank. My mother disclosed that she deposits a small amount into that account every month, contemplating the unforeseen future. It seemed she intended to save for Peter as well, but he failed to grasp that and perceived it merely as a demand to open an account. My mother had a habit of speaking in a curt manner, which could come off as cold. As Peter struggled to understand her real intentions, their conversations often missed the mark. Despite my difficulties in communicating with my mother, I intervened, defending Peter. Come on, Peter is busy too. No need to be so hard on him. You always say things so carelessly, not understanding the gravity of what I'm trying to convey. Not only did my mother's tone sharpen, but she also became emotional quickly. It appeared she was angry because her daughter didn't appreciate her kindness. Later in our bedroom, Peter confided in me. Your mom always seems to be nagging me. She gives me these confusing commands every day until I get home. She's like a broken record, telling me to get insurance, invest my money, and all that jazz. I'm exhausted from work and I just can't deal with her anymore. Understanding my mother's concerns, I attempted to pacify Peter. On the surface, he seemed to get along with my mother, but deep down, resentment lingered. I empathized with both my mother's feelings and Peter's frustrations. I acknowledged the annoyance of being incessantly told what to do and the weariness of unwanted advice. I can't stand it anymore. I'll deal with insurance and investments when I feel like it. As for the Gold Bank account, it's obvious she'll only use it for her deposits or investments. Nowadays, you can't have multiple accounts at the same bank. Gold Bank is the closest to our house and she just wants an account. It's as clear as day. Normally calm, Peter became very emotional. I silently acknowledged Peter's story with a sigh, contemplating if there was a way to resolve the ongoing tensions. The thought crossed my mind that living separately might be a better option to escape the nagging. However, I hesitated, knowing that leaving my mother alone wasn't something I wanted to consider. Peter's seemingly spiteful remark about living separately struck me as mean-spirited. "I'm just kidding. I'm going to do whatever she asks, whether it's an account or whatever. I should just set it up for her, right?" Peter commented in a resigned tone, lying down on the bed in frustration. With nothing more to add, I closed my eyes and lay down, mirroring Peter's posture. Almost a year had passed since the three of us began living together, and our conflicting feelings persisted. I feared that our days of discomfort would continue, but an unexpected incident unfolded. Cancer. It was a frustrating revelation at my age. Returning home earlier than usual one day, my mother casually shared that she had been diagnosed with cancer. Peter hadn't returned yet, and it seemed like an opportune moment for her to break the news. "Oh no, is it serious? How advanced is it?" I asked, concerned. "It doesn't seem too serious yet, but I'm going to have surgery soon and will probably be hospitalized for a bit. Can you handle the housework?" My mother's focus on housework rather than her surgery left me conflicted, wondering if her concern was genuine or merely interfering. Despite my irritation, I assured her that I could manage. "Of course, I can manage. How old do you think I am? What's with you? I'm really worried about you," I responded, feeling a mix of frustration and concern. "You're crabby. I get it without you saying it every time. I can handle the housework. You just focus on getting better." The news of my mother's cancer affected me more than I anticipated, leaving me frustrated at my inability to offer comforting words. As Peter returned, he listened without fuss, agreeing to my mother's requests. Despite my desire to tell my mother the truth about Peter's true feelings, I couldn't due to my current standing. My mother believed Peter was on her side even as she scolded him sternly. I could only murmur my true allegiance to my mother in my heart. Later, my mother informed Peter about her illness and the need for surgery. Although I couldn't gauge Peter's reaction, seeing the peaceful look on my mother's face before she slept reassured me. However, Peter seemed deeply disturbed by the news of my mother's illness. How bad is your mother's illness?" "I'm uncertain. All she mentioned was that it wasn't that serious. Is that right?" Peter appeared unconvinced, offering a cryptic reaction. With my heart in turmoil, I attempted to calm down as I headed to bed. Our conversation for the day ended and Peter and I went to sleep in a chilling silence. From that day on, more than ever before, I continued living a life without crossing paths with Peter. It seemed that my mother and Peter rarely encountered each other. I started suspecting when Peter even came home. I usually went to bed before his return, and my day began either before he woke up or after he had left. It felt like living separately within the same house, and I was starting to wonder about Peter's thoughts. The day of my mother's surgery finally arrived. My mother sighed in her hospital room, expressing doubt that Peter would come. Even though he didn't, I silently kept my surprise hidden, encouraging my mother as she entered the operating room saying, "You got this." The surgery concluded roughly 5 hours later, and during that time Peter never showed up. Despite informing him, and he should have known about the surgery day, I could only assume he was busy with work. The surgery was successful, temporarily removing the cancer cells from my mother. Although she needed to stay hospitalized for a while, I sincerely hoped for her full recovery. When my mother woke up from the anesthesia, she seemed distracted. Despite being happy about the successful surgery, she couldn't help but wonder when Peter would visit. Attempting to reassure her, I said, "Don't worry, he'll come eventually." My mother, emotionally volatile, started to doubt that she might be disliked when Peter took a while to show up. While her suspicions weren't entirely wrong, she still believed that Peter was on her side, feeling betrayed. Listening to my mother's agitated complaints throughout her hospital stay, I felt a heavy heart. A week after the surgery, Peter finally visited. Coincidentally, I was there after work, and I could see my mother's face light up when he arrived. "Hey, how are you feeling? I thought you'd never come, Peter." My mother's tone sounded as if she had been waiting for a lover, embarrassing me. Peter handed a cake box to my mother, his forced smile making me uneasy. I quietly took the cake box from him, opened it slightly to confirm its contents, and then threw it into the trash. "Hey, what do you think you're doing, Peter?" My mother and I looked at each other, expressing our anger at what had transpired. "What did I do?" I asked my amazed mother. "Did you see what was inside the cake?" My mother trembled at the unexpected question as if she hadn't thought it was possible. I fixed my gaze upon Peter, seeking confirmation of my suspicions. Peter appeared visibly frustrated and upset, aligning with my expectations. In response, I tightened my fist, prepared to confront him for his actions. I couldn't comprehend why Samantha, my sister, had callously discarded the gift I had specifically purchased for Peter. Without hesitation, Peter assumed an aggressive stance, seemingly ready to defend his actions. Infuriated, I demanded an explanation, questioning his understanding of the situation. Refusing to let Peter have the final say, I acknowledged the long-standing history of us living parallel lives. But this time, I couldn't allow my mother to suffer due to Peter's thoughtless act. For a while, I had observed the disconnect between Peter and me, but confronting him directly felt somewhat intimidating. Nevertheless, I couldn't let my mother endure the consequences of Peter's thoughtlessness. The well-being of my mother was paramount, and I was determined to prevent any harm caused by Peter's misguided actions. Attempting to distract from the tension, Peter suggested trying the cake, claiming its deliciousness. Skeptically, I retrieved the cake box from the trash, noting its seemingly ordinary appearance. However, upon closer inspection, I recognized it as homemade. The unevenly spread cream and slightly damaged strawberries hinted that it wasn't from a professional bakery. Ignoring Peter's attempt to divert the situation, I intervened, taking a bite from the cake to expose the truth. Instantly, I detected an abnormality, an overwhelming saltiness and a potent smell of alcohol. Fighting the urge to vomit, I spat out the offensive cake. My mother, oblivious to the details, innocently inquired about it. Realizing the severity of the situation, I explained that the cake contained excessive salt and alcohol, substances harmful to a cancer patient. Peter, caught off guard, paled as he hadn't anticipated my discovery. Confronted with the truth, he abandoned his facade of goodwill, revealing a defiant expression. At that moment, my mother, comprehending the betrayal, looked at Peter with sheer terror. His true intentions had become apparent, and Peter, no longer able to feign goodwill, admitted to his deceit with a defiant expression. The sinister motive behind Peter's actions became glaringly apparent. A calculated attempt to expedite my mother's suffering for the sake of collecting insurance money. Peter's manic, almost hysterical laughter revealed his insanity as he shamelessly boasted about his intentions. The sheer horror of knowing his sinister plan and hearing him brazenly confess sent a shiver down my spine. The realization struck me like a sledgehammer. "Do you even comprehend the gravity of what you were attempting? It's a crime!" I exclaimed, incredulous at his lack of remorse. Peter's callous response further heightened the dread, declaring his willingness to become a criminal just to be rid of my mother. The derogatory terms he used, referring to her as an old hag, and his attempt to make her consume the poisoned cake shattered the image of Peter in my mother's mind, leaving her in a state of despair. As Peter vented his frustrations at my mother, accusing her of nagging and interference, her shocked eyes reflected the pain of betrayal. She had only sought to alleviate his financial struggles, not realizing the depth of his resentment. I maintained my composure, refusing to be intimidated by Peter's angry outburst. I could see my mother's frail form crushed by despair in my peripheral vision. In response to Peter's threats and aggression, I defiantly declared my determination to protect my mother. Rather than succumbing to his manipulation, I vowed to drive him away. I revealed that instead of gaining insurance money, he would be the one facing financial consequences, hinting at alimony. Peter, caught off guard, scoffed at my words, confident in his deceit. However, my trump card lay in a large envelope containing evidence of his affair. I scattered the contents at his feet, exposing his infidelity with a mistress. Peter's face drained of color, realizing the gravity of the situation. The evidence, gathered by a private investigator, left him with no room for denial. In a desperate attempt to deflect blame, Peter lashed out, attempting to paint me as the villain. However, his excuses sounded like the whining of a defeated individual. Despite his shouts and protests, I stood unfazed, resolute in exposing the unfairness of his actions. The revelation of his double life, cheating while feigning busyness, left me overwhelmed with a mix of emotions. Tears welled up as I reflected on the profound betrayal and the illusion of the life I thought we had built together. At that moment, the gravity of my delayed marriage hit me, and I couldn't help but feel a profound sense of regret and heartbreak. I experienced profound happiness when I married Peter, making it all the more disheartening when he began speaking ill of my mother, leading to a breakdown in our communication. The pent-up sadness and frustration I couldn't share with anyone suddenly erupted. Despite my emotional turmoil, Peter merely sneered, indifferent to my feelings. He callously expressed his intention to live happily with someone named Abigail after gaining insurance money, disregarding my emotions entirely. Attempting to suppress my trembling body, I prepared to respond to Peter's insults. However, before I could, my mother intervened, expressing her disbelief at Peter's actions. She condemned him not only for attempting harm, but also for disrespecting me. My mother revealed that Peter and his daughter were the reasons she hadn't experienced happiness in her married life. The once calm and cool Peter had become distorted with ugliness, his desire to escape from both my mother and me painfully apparent. My mother, having reached her limit with Peter's incessant ranting, passionately defended us. She highlighted the sacrifices we had made for him and how he trampled on our efforts. Fired up, my mother demanded that Peter apologize to me and never return home. She asserted that I could not find happiness without someone like him. In response to my mother's demand, Peter finally fled the scene, leaving behind the evidence of his infidelity scattered on the floor. I looked at my mother, breathing heavily, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. She embodied the image of a noble mother protecting her precious daughter. Overwhelmed by emotion, I sobbed uncontrollably in her comforting embrace. After the hospital incident, I took decisive action. I visited a lawyer and initiated the divorce process. I informed Peter of my decision, and the divorce was finalized smoothly. Peter moved out, likely living with the so-called Abigail. Through my lawyer, I planned to seek damages from him for attempting to harm my mother. Despite his hopes to rely on her life insurance, I made sure he didn't receive the money my mother had saved for him. As for me, after my mother's discharge from the hospital, we began a new life together. I chose a workplace with shorter hours to spend more time with her. Although I haven't fully repaid her, our communication has improved, and I find true happiness in our newfound openness. I am committed to enjoying life with my mother, free from the troubles caused by Peter's actions.